Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Eleanor, and today I'd like to talk about a book by Charmian Clift called Peel Me a Lotus. Now, there's three different ways I have found of looking at this book. So I'll go through each one because this sort of book will probably entice you for one or more of those reasons. So, first of all, I would say it is a fantastic travel memoir. If you are curious at all or entertained at all by the idea of an Australian family in the mid to late 1950s deciding to move with their two primary school aged children to a relatively unknown at that time island in Greece called Hydra, because they are journalists who are dreaming of having a time and space and a community in which to write creatively, then this is the book for you. It is written in chapters that are chronological, so it starts in February and continues month by month. And it's a page turner, it's comical, it captures the feel of what it would be like to be on that island at that time. So you can practically feel the heat of the summer as summer arrives. You feel that you yourself have jumped off the cave, the lip of the cave, down into the natural ocean pool with everyone else. You will get to know the Greek people in the community, their different habits and views on this strange foreign family that's in their midst. And that is all going to be given to you from the point of view of a young mother who is dreaming of having more time to do her creative work as well as her husband doing so. And right at the beginning, they buy a house and she's about to have her third baby. So there's that kind of drama and excitement. So there's the first way of looking at it, and I highly recommend it as such. There are also rather gorgeous illustrations, which you can see they're joyful, they're effervescent, and they're actually drawn by another creative person within that community who Charmian Clift knows and talks about. She uses pseudonyms, so she calls her Lola, but the illustrator's real name is Nancy Dignan. Okay, I'm back. It is another day. Um, I was trying to quickly record a video before I went out last night, and then I stop everything when I have an opportunity to do a FaceTime with my grandson. So that was my 2-year-old grandson calling me. So back to the wonderful Charmian Clift and Peel Me a Lotus. So that was actually it's a good way to start with that, talking about the first out of three ways that I'm reading this book. Now, the second way is a biographical manner of reading it. Now, I don't know who's watching this video, so perhaps some of you know all about Charmian Clift's life and are perhaps Clifties, as I've just discovered. Many Charmian Clift fans call themselves. If so, you understand what I'm saying. If you don't know anything about Charmian Clift's life, a quick Google will reveal everything, and I'm not going to go into detail here, other than to say that when reading this, you realize that there are certain biographical details that add so much more to the reading of this book than you otherwise might notice. Even if you don't know much about Clift, you probably know something maybe about Leonard Cohen. You know about how he arrived on the island of Hydra. And you might be interested to know that he was helped when he first arrived and given a small room to live in for a while by Charmian and her husband, George Johnston. So there's also the background, the historical background of the island becoming more and more as the years progress from 1956, when this book was written, to the 1960s. I think Leonard Cohen arrived 1960. It became more and more a meeting point for different artists from all around the world. And this book is a very good record of what it was like to see these personalities come in and to see them in different ways reacting to the freedom that they had to work within this art-loving community, and some did better than others. And it is just for that alone fascinating to see young single people arriving on this island and being seen and described by Charmian Clift while she is desperately struggling with these, with a newborn and two older kids, with an entire household to manage and a community which she feels a responsibility for, for better or worse. And that is doubly fascinating if you know a little bit of how Charmian Clift was born into a family living in Kiama in New South Wales, Australia, which was a small beachside suburb. And her family was not a literary or artistic family per se. And all her younger years, she had yearned to get out of there. And the minute she earned enough money, with a photo that her sister took of her and, unbeknownst to Clift, sent into a competition, the minute she got that money, she went to Sydney to start her career as a journalist, as a writer. Almost immediately met George Johnston, and their dream together was to get away. And I think this book is wonderful to read alongside any book by Gerald Murnane, because here you also have an Australian who grew up, well, in his case, it was an outer suburb of Melbourne in the state of Victoria, but he didn't have many artists or writers around him at all. His family was working class, as was Clift's. And he also had 3 children, but he was not married to another writer or artist. And from what I gather, his wife went to work while he stayed home, looked after the children, and tried to write as much as he could. Now, Clift was highly ambitious, but was also married to another writer who was highly ambitious. Also, there's a personality difference in the sense that it seems, from what I can tell, that Gerald Murnane did not have an ambition to travel at all, and still doesn't, and in fact has hardly traveled around Australia, when it was the most fervent wish of Clift and her husband to move, and in particular to Greece. And it is interesting, for me at least, to think about how Kiama, as I know it, which is where Clift grew up, is the most stunning seaside suburb. So yes, it does feel like it's in the middle of nowhere, but I mean, Gerald Murnane is also in the middle of nowhere. And I can't help wondering if, had Clift lived longer, she might have been able to appreciate the irony of moving a family so far away from a huge island, Australia, which is just a haven for idyllic oceanside spots, to a rocky, at that time deserted Greek island where life was so difficult on a daily basis, just to look after your basics, um, basic hygiene, bathrooms, plumbing, water supply, etc., etc. So that's the second way of looking at it. The third way of looking at it is my favorite and is my most unexpected. It was a huge surprise to me to realize that even though this book has, on first reading, a veneer of having been written as things were happening, jotting things down in your journal month by month, it actually is a meticulously crafted work that has threaded through it certain symbols, metaphors, threads of ideas, and personalities that come and go, that after you've read the book, they come to mind, and you realize that there's a subtext to what's being written, and that it's also not a it's not a pure autobiographical text. It does feel like all of these things happened and all of these people were there on the island. And it's not that Clift is embellishing or hiding anything. It's not that. It's that she's expressing her truth in subtle ways that point to the fact that she is a superlative writer, which is very exciting to discover. And it was especially exciting for me because I didn't really know much about her other than that she was a month or so ago, she was recommended to me by a friend. So I'll give you some examples of what I mean by that, and maybe that will be helpful to you if you've read the book already or if you're about to read the book. It doesn't really matter. There are no spoilers. One example is this repeating metaphor of Icarus that is in this book. There is an Australian artist, who is given, he and his wife are given pseudonyms, as are all of the artists actually that I mentioned. If you read the introduction, it's clear that he's really Sidney Nolan. The introduction is written by Polly Sampson, and it's an excellent introduction. So here comes Sidney Nolan, and he is living on a higher area of the island than Charmian and her family, and he doesn't have children, and he's looked after by his wife, and he is sketching and painting over and over again the figure of Icarus, and underneath is the Minotaur. And Clift with her family goes to visit him a few times, and she notices these and she makes note of them. And then later on, when they finally have bought their house and Sidney Nolan arrives to have a look at it, he's a family friend really, and I should say he's well known, but he's not really famous at that time. Clift immediately realizes that he's different from the other artists, and then he's sitting in this basement. I'll I'll find it in the book. So he's sitting in their basement, and it's when they've just bought, so they haven't moved in yet, yes? And his pseudonym is Henry. And he is regarding with a sweet, contemplative smile the mildewed green walls rising out of little symmetrical mounds of powdered plaster and cat dirt, and the receding musty caverns through the arches. They don't have much money, and they've bought what they can afford. Best like this, isn't it, he said, when the consummation can be achieved with a thought, with a blink of your eyes, and the vision is still without fault, safe under your skull. And then he says, I'd like you to have one of my paintings for this wall. If it doesn't wreck the vision, that is. Yes, please, I said gratefully, and Icarus if you can spare one. I'd like Icarus aspiring on that wall. So, yes, that probably did happen. But the way it's described, the occasion on which it's described, and then the way that idea of Icarus weaves in and out a couple more, 2 or 3 times during the rest of the book, makes this a step above the usual travel memoir. This in itself is a work of art that is meticulously crafted. I'm repeating myself. For goodness sake, Eleanor, stop repeating yourself. But it is. It's meticulously crafted. Okay. So later on, once Henry, aka Sidney Nolan, and his wife have left the island for a while, and they send a postcard. They send a letter, excuse me, and she says, the message of it comes singing and clear, unequivocal, untinged by doubt. Go on then, fly. So it doesn't matter what he wrote. For her, any note from him reminds her of Icarus and reminds her of her struggle, and without talking about herself too much, without going into a huge confessional of sorts, remaining focused on the book that she is writing, on the goal of her life, while she's maintaining a balance between looking after her family and looking after her art and her husband's art. She is able to find shelter in writing this book through art. This is not a journal. This is not free. This is not free association. This is more than a mere travel memoir. And at some point, you have to be aware that while all the things that she's talking about are happening, she's also writing this very book that is in your hands as you're reading it. And that is absolutely unbelievable if you think of everything that she had to juggle. And yes, it infuriates me that when I was looking more details of her life up, over and over again, this ridiculous connection with Leonard Cohen comes up again and again. And yes, she helped him. And yes, he praises her. But, he arrives as this single dude who has no responsibilities and has a bit of money. And there she is helping him. I think there's even a photograph of her, like he's in their house and she's like serving him food. And she is such a great talent and a great mom and a great partner and the nucleus of a society, of a community of artists. And I feel that more people need to know about her. Of course, I've only just discovered her, so what do I know? She I can't explain it, but I have such great affection for her. And it's really because of her holding back in this book. She doesn't hide things, she holds them back so that the art can express what it is that she's going through. So it's not a one-off, this is not a one-off read. This is something that you can reread and get different things from in different times of your life. And I think also, I've been reading quite a bit lately about women trying to juggle being artists and especially writers while also having a family with young children. And often they'll write in the mood that they're in, so that the story is really quite one-sided. That's fine. But the miracle of Charmian Clift in this particular book, Peel Me a Lotus, is that she's able to somehow portray her love and fixation with each aspect of her life, so that to love your own artistic persona, to love your own art, and to believe in yourself as a writer doesn't need to denigrate your love and obsession and adoration of your role as a mother or as a partner or as a community leader. And several times in this book, a new artist arrival mentions Gertrude Stein somehow. And I think to myself how a lot of people who know anything about writing will know about Gertrude Stein and her salon. She recognized great artists before they became famous. She recognized great writers, and she managed to make some sort of community with them. And I think Charmian Clift is like that, but she happens to be also in a heterosexual, monogamous, traditional marriage, and she has 3 children and not much money, not much money at all. So I hope in this way I've managed to give you an idea of what reading this is like. I would love to, it's the kind of book I would love to give to Sheila Heti. If I was Sheila Heti's friend, I'd email her and I'd say, listen, read it and let's have a coffee and chat about it, because I'd love to hear what she thinks of it. Because this sort of novel it's not easy to find these days. It really isn't. It's modern. It's almost too modern for its own time. And it's almost as if we're not even ready for it, because it flies under the radar. I don't think anyone would really notice it unless they really sat down and thought about what is it that Clift is doing in here. I'm now thinking that I have completely, I'm looking at my notes out of the corner of my eye, and I completely forgot a few other things. So it's not only the Sidney Nolan Icarus symbolism. It's also different ways she uses. For example, they have an ocean pool, and they dive into it all the time, and they have the best fun with it in summer. Of course, Australia is chockers, absolutely full of these ocean pools, but no, they had to go to Greece to enjoy it. This is just me being crazy. But okay, back to the point. So they love the pool. Then one season, they decide the municipal leaders of the island of Hydra decide that there have been a few sharks spotted, and they want to put a net at the entrance to the pool for the safety, of the swimmers. There's lots of children swimming, etc. Well, that pool, because it has a natural flow in and out of it, the minute you put a net in, it has these buoys floating. And that means that a lot of the rubbish or the seaweed is pushed in but can't get out. And so the natural beauty of that pool is ruined by trying to protect the people swimming from sharks. And yes, I'm sure that happened, but also the way that Clift mentions it at the moment in this chronologically in the time period of this book acts as a symbol of what the community is going through and what Clift herself might be going through. Another way she does this is by having a character come in and say the words that, if they came from Clift as the writer of this travel memoir, would sound different. For example, there's a character called Mrs. Nip, Knip, who comes in towards the end of the memoir. She is in fact the mother of one of Clift's friends who's been living on the island for a while, and she, Mrs. Nip, does not understand. She doesn't understand why these artists are coming to this island and most of them not doing anything. they're not writing, they're not painting, they're just hanging around. And in particular, she is interested in Charmian Clift and her family because she sees what they're going through. They have no money, the house is falling apart, they don't have the money to pay the plumber, the children are running wild, the baby's driving everyone crazy. They have to feed and entertain artists. I mean, they don't have to, but that's what they do. And so she turns to them and she turns to Kim and she says, why? I don't understand. Why are you doing this? Now, to have a character say that is much more interesting than if Clift herself had said it, because it's very boring. I mean, it is very boring to have a mother say, oh, I don't know why I'm doing this. I thought this would be fun, and now it's not so much fun. It's much more interesting to have this character come in, because first of all, you as the reader are defending immediately, are in the defensive mode, because you're on Charmian Clift's side. Also, simultaneously, you're probably saying the same things as Mrs. Nip is saying. So this is what I mean by meticulously crafted. Can I say meticulously crafted one more time? Yes, I can. So let me know if you have read this book or if you're planning to read it. There is a companion piece. It is this is the original book I got out of the library, but it's a companion piece and comes after Mermaid Singing, which I haven't read yet, and this is the book I just purchased because I thought I'd like to read Mermaid Singing. But from a cursory glance at Mermaid Singing, I can see that it's somewhat different in the way it's written, even though it's still a travel memoir of their time prior to 1956, I guess. Anyway, thank you very much, and don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind. Bye.